Therefore, in this presentation, I will focus on the needs of international students, most of whom are from Asian countries. My goal as an English teacher has been to support more students, more domestic students, who wish to study abroad and be a successful, competent contributor in study abroad situations. My research questions come from the assumptions that if students go abroad with bare minimum English competencies, they must struggle to engage in academic studies, such as discussions and writing reports. Therefore, I try to investigate what the academic needs of exchange students are and how they dealt with any issues they experienced. To provide some philosophical background to my approach, which looks at the reflections of study abroad program participants, social constructivists hold assumptions that individuals seek understanding of the world in which they live and work. Individuals develop subjective meanings of their experiences, meanings directed towards certain objects or things. These meanings are varied and multiple, leading the researcher to look for the complexity of views, rather than narrowing meaning into a few categories or ideas. The goal of the research is to rely as much as possible on the participants' views of the situation being studied. Narrative research is a strategy of inquiry in which the researcher studies the lives of individuals and asks one or more individuals to provide stories about their lives. This information is then often retold or restoried by the researcher into a narrative chronology. In the end, the narrative combines views from the participant's life with those of the researcher's life in a collaborative narrative. In addition, narrative research can be a new model of language learner identity in assessing the impact of study abroad, according to Benson and others. Also, reflecting on study abroad helps better understand how they had developed interculturally and how that development could influence them in the future. This is a mixed method study, and the first batch of the questionnaire was conducted in September 2019, followed by interviews in October that year. The second batch of the questionnaire was given in April 2020, and this time I conducted follow-up interviews with only Japanese students, as they are the main target of my larger study. Interview questions are partially adapted from previous researchers' work, but they are mainly derived from the research questions themselves. Savicki and Price listed questions for prior, during, and after study abroad. There are 20 after study abroad questions of 5 categories, some of which are shown here. As for the informants, there were responses from 104 students, 42 in 2019 and 62 in 2020, including Japanese students. Of the 2019 cohort, I interviewed all the students who said they could be interviewed, 10 Japanese and 14 international students. Of the 2020 cohort, I interviewed 7 Japanese students, although a lot more offered to be interviewed, just I limited to 7 for now. In terms of the survey respondents' demographic, male-female ratio was 30:74. Of the 2 colleges at the university, the ratio between the 2 was fairly equal to 58:46. 45 of the respondents said they are English basic students, which means they enter the university with the sufficient competence in the English language, regardless of their nationality. When I asked their native language, 12 languages were mentioned. and 43 of them reported different languages other than Japanese. This graph shows the mother tongues of these 43 respondents, all of whom are Asian. As you can see here, students from various Asian language backgrounds took part in the exchange programs abroad. And it turns out that one of the L1 English speakers is of Japanese descent, but I left him in the data as he claims the first language is English. And this table shows the total destinations, including those of Japanese students. And I think this might be interesting to those of you from other universities, because the destinations represent 29 countries and regions, and about half of the students, 51, studied in European countries. And 35 students studied in inner circle countries. 25 students studied in East or Southeastern Asia countries. Okay, so about the questionnaires, this asks difficulties students had in academic study abroad using English, using 6-point Likert scale with 33 items, 1 representing not difficult at all to 6 very difficult, adapted from Kojima's presentation on JSET 2019. And overall, English-based students found academic demands to be comparative or not demanding compared to home institution, while Japanese-based students found academic tasks more difficult. And for the 2020 survey, I also asked about the influence of COVID-19, which I will briefly report on. So I'll show some slides picked up from the questionnaires. I won't go over 33 items, but here are some. Understanding lectures was, and for if you could pay attention to the blue ones, English-based students found they were not difficult at all. And you can see that Japanese-based students found them difficult overall. Similar results everywhere. Taking lecture notes. Understanding instructions of your professors. Not difficult at all for English-based students. Understanding a writer's attitude and purpose. Or understanding academic textbooks. And you can see a kind of U-curve here and there. Also understanding journal articles. And this is more about discussions or speaking. Participating in class discussions was not difficult at all for most English-based students. And writing research paper is found to be a little more difficult than in other scales, but still you can see that most international students, English-based students found it less demanding than Japanese-based students found. Okay, so this is briefly from Spring 20 responses. 37 out of 65 respondents not mentioned the effect of COVID-19 on their studies. 24 students were affected physically by campus closure, class or internship cancellations, shortened programs, or visa issues. And 17 students reported difficulties that were caused by online classes, such as in communication, time difference, feeling anxious, or having lower quality of learning, or lowered motivation and concentration. Now, I would like to move on to interview data from fall 2019. 24 students were interviewed, 10 in Japanese, 14 in English. And today I'm focusing on the English interviews. They were between 15 and 45 minutes long, on average 27 minutes. All multilingual speakers. So what struck me from the questionnaire, which was confirmed by the interviews, is the fact that all these students are multilingual learners. Some learned multiple languages before coming to the university, and others learned them at home university and at host university while they went on exchange program. Now, I would like to move on to interview data. So I will show the profiles of interviewed students in 2 slides. And as you will see, only 4 of these students studied in inner circle countries, such as Australia, Canada, and UK, where the majority of the population speak English as their first language. So Kathy and Bon from Vietnam studied in Australia, Amy in Canada, Tina in UK, Kumo from Vietnam studied in Austria, Ash from Sri Lanka in Austria, Santu from Sri Lanka in Switzerland, and the next slide shows Dana in Germany, Candy in France, Nadia in the Netherlands, Gibby went to Korea, G went to Hong Kong, and John went to Norway, and so on. And you can also see what languages they say they speak and their English level at enrollment or pre-study abroad, and some have information about post-study abroad. So these are the 4 questions used for the semi-structured interviews. 1, how do you compare the academic demands and difficulties in APU? APU is a place they study, this is the home institution, with that of the host university. 2, how did you cope with any difficulties you had with academic English? 3, how, in your opinion, does knowing more than 2 languages help in your academic studies? And finally, I asked for any advice or recommendations that they might have for other students who want to study abroad, or to the faculty and administrative staff. There is 10 hours worth interview data, both in English and Japanese. Everything has been transcribed with support from 2 research assistants. And I'm actually still grappling with coding the data using the qualitative data analysis software called NVivo. But I will share the most recurring messages here today. First, about academic demands. International students whose English level is high to begin with did not have a hard time with classes, while Japanese students found it naturally difficult. The recurring theme from this question was the much smaller class sizes at host universities, thus more engaging lectures and many group works required. As you can see in the quote from Bonn, so they have fewer classes, but each class workload is heavy. And they have very small classes, like up to 20 students in a class, while in their home university, they may have about 200 students. Second, when asked about how the students coped in times of difficulties, they mentioned many strategies, such as dividing up the workload, preparing before class, going to the office to see the professor and the TA, asking native speaker flatmates to check their academic writing, learning course-specific vocabulary, planning beforehand, reading and listening more news and academic journals. As you see in the quote here, Candy says, I have tried and cope with it by reading and listening more news and academic journals. Or Kashi reporting that she found that it was important to discipline herself. So she would prepare and read and learn every day. And it seems that probably they were doing this already, but it was accelerated because they felt the demand on site. Being selected for exchange program abroad means they are successful students. At APU, we expect all students to have a high competency in the other language. So if they are English basis, they should learn Japanese. If they are Japanese, they should learn English as well. And expect about half the students to have a conversational command in the 3rd language as well. Since most international students, they have their mother tongue, the English for admission, Japanese for survival, and may take up their 4th, 5th, or 6th language at university. I asked the students their ideas about how multilinguality has played in their academic studies. And the overwhelming responses were that knowing languages makes it easy to communicate with others, but not particularly for academic purposes. And they thought it was useful if they were learning a similar language, for example, Japanese and Korean or English and German. So as you see here, as you said, the more you speak languages, the more knowledgeable you are. I think learning different languages and being able to understand different cultures not only helped my studies, but my social life as well. So Ash says it helped his study too, but his social life as well. But most students say it wasn't really helpful for their studies, but more for making friends and connecting with local people. Finally, I asked all the participants if there were a preparation program or course for students who are selected for exchange programs, what would you like them to cover? And various recommendations emerged, such as intensive English course for Japanese students, which we have to some extent, learning academic writing, or the chance to meet the previous students in person. As Amy here said, to quote Bom, beside the guidance, APU can organize a meeting between the returning and the incoming students. It will be greater, or that connecting with people who had the same experience is very helpful. And that's something that's lacking in the current situation. And I'd like to pursue that soon. I think our time is like, 1 minute left. Okay. To summarize both data sets, the great needs among English-based students lay in improving academic writing skills and academic or specialized vocabulary learning, plus the apparent lack of community for study abroad students, as Kathy's quote suggests. I don't think there currently is an established community of students going to exchange yet. So this is the last slide. One way this study could lead into is to survey the needs of international students studying in the Japanese university. As for the qualitative nature of the study, I'm still, like I mentioned, in the midst of further analyzing using NVivo, and I aim to include it in the write-up in the future. Finally, I hope to elicit from the data what our Japanese students can learn from the needs of such advanced learners of English. As supporting domestic students with their academic endeavors is my main objective for this research. Thank you very much for listening. And here are the references. And I look forward to learning from your insights as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maiko. I would like to request for everyone to unmute themselves and please give Maiko a round of applause. Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much. That was a really wonderful presentation, Maiko. And we do not have Q&As in the chat, but I would open up the floor to anyone who would like to ask questions. If you could raise your hand with your video on, or if you would like to give me a signal, I will call out your name and you can ask your question. Yes. Or if you like, you could still put it in the chat. Yes, Brad, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to know your answer actually to the question about what can Japanese students learn from this experience? How do you feel about that?
I think first, for the majority that I am supporting, their basic knowledge is still lacking. So first they have to get to at least upper intermediate level. But at the same time, I think what we could support them is having a community of learners who have similar goals and then gain information, give information to each other. I think that's something I would like to initiate or support if possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Are there any more questions for Maiko?
Did I answer my Jason's question?
Yes, you did in your slides with the areas and countries. We have one question in the chat here from Jim, who asked, would you say that the problems Japanese students face is more linguistic or in thinking styles?
I would say more linguistic to some degree. I think maybe you notice their attitude toward taking lectures is quite passive in general, especially because they're used to having big lecture halls and not being expected to contribute much. But once they go abroad, they realize that that's not right. They are representative of not just the university, but the whole country. Like she's the only student from Japan. And every time a professor talks about the case, they ask her for an opinion. How about in Japan? So they don't realize that they are actually, without knowing, acting as a representative. And that kind of mindset could be taught beforehand. Critical thinking.
There is an add-on to that question. Yep. In terms of thinking styles, I think Jim meant to say critical thinking. Yep.
From my experience, the whole idea of critical thinking was missing from my own education, and I had a hard time grappling with that in my master's and higher education. But when you do go to primary schools, class observation, you notice that they are actually working on that. There are some schools that try to teach them to think critically, but I haven't really seen that come through to the university students that we serve yet. I'm not sure what you think, but just the concept of critical thinking is often just missing, maybe.
Well, if I can just add my comment, I don't like to speak on Zoom. I understand my own students' reticence in using Zoom, but what can I say? I have many students who go abroad and they come back to Japan after a year and they say they couldn't get involved in discussions, they couldn't become active in the classroom very much. And I'm trying to work out why this might be, what kind of barriers are stopping the Japanese students being more active. And I think you're right, that they're not encouraged to think critically at the university level. So when they go abroad, they just don't know what to do. And of course, critical thinking can be defined in so many different ways. Are we really, as educators, getting a good grasp on that and giving the appropriate education or culturally appropriate education in terms of how we, let's say how Western people, I'm from Europe, so how we might think about expectations in the university classroom, and how are we giving these expectations to our students before they go? I don't think we are actually, but I wonder what you think about this.
Thank you. I guess, do we have time for this?
I am very sorry to cut in, but your time is actually up. But Maiko, I do have a suggestion on how you could continue this conversation. Would you be available after this presentation?
Sure.
And an option for anyone who would like to continue this conversation is to go to the Hangouts, which you can find on your Eventzilla page. I'll get the link right now so that you can find a room and you can continue your discussion right there. How's that? Done. Hangouts.
Thank you. Thank you for, sorry, I didn't get to answer your question.
Okay.
An easy question. No one did homestay for exchange program, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, everybody who's still here, please give Maiko another round of applause. Thank you so much for your presentation today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maiko.
Okay. All right. The next room host is here and I'm being kicked out. So I will pass it over to the next host. Are you there, Claire?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. I'm just working at the back doing stuff. So,
Okay.
But I am here. Yeah, I'll show my face in about 5 seconds.
No problem. I will just make you host for now so that you can set up.
Thank you.
So I'm being kicked out.
You're not being kicked out. You can stay.
Oh no, as in like Zoom kicked me out because like somebody else
Oh.
signed it. Okay.
That was Phil probably.
I think that's Zoom. Okay. Let me sign in again. Okay. Oh, they left. Okay. Hi, Chiho.
Hi, Jiho.
Hi.
Did
Hi.
you need to practice anything before we get started, or?
Yeah, I think I need to practice. I'm not good at ICT, so I want to try. I can show my slide.
Okay, you've been made a co-host now, so you should be able to use the share screen. I
Can
can
you
see
see it?
that.
Can see-
Yeah,
Yeah, should be okay then.
yeah. Have confidence. Your skills are fine. Emily, are you still recording?
No, oh wait. It says recording, but I can't stop.
Oh, I can. Should
Yeah.
I stop it?
Yes,
And then
please.
yeah.